Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the stream. Been kind of a curious day today. Lots going on. Uh, as it is, I may make this a two-part series because some of the details that I have to talk about will carry over to tomorrow. But what I'm discussing tonight is a couple things. First of all, Tim Holmeseth is at it again, making a complete fool out of himself. And second, we just might have the reason why there has been a high concentration on an effort to interfere with my coverage of the Neely Blanchard trial and uh, to keep people away from this channel. Now, what I'm going to start off with is this document. Um, Now, what this um, is a filing that Homeseth made uh, to the state of Florida, of all things. And what this gets into is that Alexander Goddard had made a complaint to the state of Florida regarding Randy Erickson and her real estate business. And as I go through here, this is self explanatory, and I am going to uh, show you why one statement, at least one statement in here, explains why Tim Holmeseth is upset with my coverage of the trial. As you get down through, you can see here that this was sent to the Division of Real Estate in Tallahassee, Florida. So right away we know this has to do with Randy Erickson, since she's a real estate broker, said to have a connection, you know, to Florida with her real estate license. And so, but it starts off rather interestingly. Dear child, introduction, William Kevin Murtaugh. Well, look at what happened with Neely Blanchard. And then we have Alexander Goddard. Yep, how did that go? That was another fuck around and find out. Now, what does Neely Blanchard have to do with the Florida Department of Real Estate? Well, we go down here to this. I'm contacting you in regards to case number 2022 056651, pertains to an intersection of the aforementioned case in your files and Timothy Charles Homeseth versus Goddard, U.S. Court, Eastern District of Tennessee, as well as Homeseth v. Page, Middle District of Tennessee. Both of these lawsuits, by the way, have been dismissed. These two suits are what Homeseth has filed in the state of Tennessee, and they both have been thrown out. On May 12th, attempted to extort me and my escrow agent, Randy Lynn Erickson, into removing news stories and journalism pieces published on his blog. Goddard is using the state of Florida in an effort to extort and terrorize me and Randy Lynn Erickson into complying with illegal and unlawful demands in violation of state and federal law. Well, What has happened? Basically, what happened is on my live stream, Goddard um, told Homestead to take down all the materials that he has written about her uh, for the past several years. And if he did not do so, then um, she was going to file um, in her court where she lives in Ohio um, that Tim Holmseth has violated the order. She gave him until midnight that Monday to do so. He did not do so, so she has filed the paperwork, and I will talk about that tomorrow. But to suffer severe questions, including my kidnap being under color of law, which Holmesat believes anytime there's a court order demanding he follow the instructions of the court, that he doesn't need to do so. He's already got warrants out for his arrest because he has violated Minnesota court orders, and the uh, warrants for his arrest keep piling up as he refuses to come to court, uh, and so forth. And so he sends this to the board of realtor. This is the department that handles real estate license. And this is what he sends them. This notice is to officially advise Florida Department of Business and Professional Regulation that the state of Florida is being used as an instrumentality, I guess that is, and presently engaging in activity that is advancing an FBI, CIA black operation called Fuck Around and Find Out. Op- Operatives of the operation communicate with each other and denote the presence of the operations and operatives for purposes of terrorizing their victims and the American public using the hashtag FAFO. This notice further advises the state of Florida that I will not comply with your and your agent's demand to remove content from my website or social media. Now, this is kind of weird because it's not the state of Florida that has anything to do with Timothy Charles Homeseth in his dispute with Alexandra Goddard. That is the state of Ohio. All Goddard did was send in a complaint against Randy Erickson and the agency that issues her real estate license. So the state of Florida has nothing at all to do with any content being ordered to be removed from Tim Holmeseth's propaganda website. So this continues on. Why does that come up? Uh, this shall serve as a cease and desist to the state of Florida from engaging in any continuing action against me, my publication, my children, my associates, my family, or any other who is being targeted because of their association or affiliation with me, which includes criminal acts of extortion, being executed and visited upon me by and through acts of distortion and domestic terrorism against escrow agent Randy Lynn Erickson by state of Florida's agent Alexandra Hannelore Goddard, the Florida Bar Association's agent Alexandra Hannelore Goddard, and state of Florida's witness Alexandra Hannelore Goddard. Below is a screenshot of an extortion exhibit that was screenshot from Alexandra Hannelore Goddard's Twitter account located at Prinny Did It. And we come down, and It says, Dear Alexandra Goddard, this letter is to inform you that your complaint has been investigated, probable cause has been found, and an administrative complaint has been filed. You may be needed as a witness in this case. If a date is set for formal hearing, you will be contacted. The department appreciates your assistance and cooperation in this matter. That notice basically means that the state of Florida has found probable cause and reason as to why Randy Lynn Erickson should lose her license to practice real estate in the state of Florida. This notice advises the state of Florida retain any and all records and files, communications, phone calls, notes, or any other evidence of transfer of information regarding Alexandra Hannelord Goddard or Randy Lynn Erickson, respectively submitted Timothy Charles Holmseth, uh, United States Court is to get a carbon copy, and enclosed is USB drive with 2 clips of William K. Murtaugh and Alexander Goddard showing state of Florida documents regarding Randy Lynn Erickson and 2 statements by Murtaugh and Goddard about the first degree murder of Neely Petrie Blanchard being called Fuck Around and Find Out. Now, what I don't understand in this is what does Neely Blanchard have to do with a dispute regarding Randy Erickson's or Randy Holmseth's real estate license? Now, interesting thing to note here on this FedEx paperwork, other than this little yellow tab here, there is no address. Holmseth has always, when sending stuff, put his address on the FedEx envelope. It is not here. Now, why is that? Rather interesting. So, but what I need to do now is I'm going to take this off the screen and I'll put me back. There is another filing that Holmseth made, and I've got to find that. So bear with me because there's something important in this filing that needs to be brought out. So let me go back in here again, see if I can find it. But there is evidence that has come out through an anonymous source having to do with the Neely Blanchard trial and the E-Clause murder that is going to answer some rather puzzling questions I had about things that came out in the discovery that I have been posting over the past few days. And that information came to light today. So let me go down here. All right, I've got to. All right, now I don't know where that went, but let me. I'm going to read a little something that was in this document. Yeah, let me go back in here because it's, oops. So, okay, I thought I had the rest of this file. Because what is contained here, and I must have gone over I must have missed this very important. So in the meantime, hi everybody. But let me get, see, download. Okay, here it is. All right. Somehow I missed a whole page, so I've got to bring this whole thing back up again. So bear with me. Because I went over, somehow I've been having trouble with my mouse. Okay, that's, I wonder why I missed that. All right, what I'm going to do. Okay. Somehow I missed this entire paragraph here. Goddard, underneath here is an important fact that he brought out. Goddard and Murtaugh are communicating with Florida bar members at the Marion State Attorney's Office, the defense attorney of Neely Blanchard, and others about me, and are engaging in criminal and conspiratorial activity for the express purpose of concealing the true facts and circumstances surrounding the assassination of my power of attorney, Christopher Hallett, in Ocala on November 15th, 2020. At no time on any of his live streams has Timothy Charles Holmseth ever made it known that Christopher Edward Hallett was his power of attorney as of November 15th, 2020. Now, this adds a whole new light to this case because now we are understanding why Tim Holmseth is desperate to keep me from covering this case, and also why he is attempting to place the blame for the murder of Christopher Hallett on anyone other than Neely Blanchard. Now, the main target of his accusations has been the eyewitness to Chris Hallett's murder. Um, this revelation that Chris Hallett and Timothy Charles Holmeseth had a direct association and a long standing association right up until the day that Chris Hallett was murdered has not till this date been told to the Marion County Court. There is no evidence that I can find in any of the discovery that Marion County and the state attorney's office in Marion County has any idea that there is a long standing direct association between Timothy Charles Holmeseth, Chris Hallett, and Randy Lynn Erickson. So that truth is out. That we now have a direct correlation between the E. Claus murder, Neely Blanchard, Randy Lynn Erickson, and Timothy Charles Holmeseth. We now understand why they have been trying to take away any suspicion about the murder of Chris Hallett away from Neely Blanchard. That is because in her car, Neely Blanchard had all the documentation that she took from Chris Hallett's house. And that documentation contains written information that ties Timothy Charles Holmeseth, Randy Lynn Erickson, and Corinne with E-Clause. And this means that their affiliation with Chris Hallett makes them material witnesses into the circumstances leading up to his murder. And that I would suspect once the state of Florida is notified of this information, that they will be looking for Mr. Holmeseth and Mrs. Erickson slash Holmeseth for their explanation as to how they were affiliated with Chris Hallett and any affiliation they had with Neely Blanchard, as well as the witness to the murder. That for some reason that Tim Holmeseth and others have been trying to pin this crime on this woman who apparently had a very close relationship with Chris Hallett. Now, as for the next piece of news, and this has to do directly with Chris Hallett. There has always been some confusion as to how Neely Blanchard came into possession of the weapon that is alleged to have been used in the murder of Chris Hallett. I have been trying to answer this question since there was evidence that had been presented to me thus far that didn't correlate with the weapon that was in Neely Blanchard's car. Let me explain. The witness testimony in this case stated that the gun used in the murder looked like a revolver, possibly a .38 special. The gun in Neely Blanchard's car was a Uzi 9mm that belonged to her husband, who was in the Coast Guard. Now, new information coming from an anonymous source has determined that the gun used in the E. Claus murder was not Neely Blanchard's husband. The weapon used to murder Chris Hallett was owned by Chris Hallett. So, according to the anonymous witness, Chris Hallett was killed with his own gun. Now, how did this happen? Apparently, according to the anonymous source, when Neely Blanchard came to the house, she had been there for quite a while. At some point, she found Chris Hallett's gun. Now, it's more likely than not that since Neely Blanchard had been frequently at Chris Hallett's house, that she would know where Chris Hallett kept his gun. For it was known that Chris Hallett owned a firearm or firearms, as a strong believer in the Second Amendment and the fact that he holds a concealed carry license. So it is alleged that Neely Blanchard found the gun, came back, and when the opportunity arose, she shot Chris Hallett with his own gun. Since the gun was probably a 38 special or some kind of revolver, that is why the gun jammed, and she unjammed it and fired additional shots into Chris Hallett, killing him. Now, I am in the process of trying to find out from the state attorney's office if this is in fact true and if this was in the witness statement that was given to the Florida sheriff when she was interviewed. Siren, what we don't know at this point is whether or not Randy Erickson told Neely where the gun was. That's a 50-50 chance that she did, but you have to remember that Neely Blanchard had been closely associated with Chris Hallett for the past 3 years. She's been in and out of his house. So it would make sense that Chris Hallett and Neely Blanchard knew a lot about each other. And that would include Neely Blanchard knowing that there was a firearm in the house and that Chris Hallett, and she knew where it was. So she could have shot Chris Hallett, dropped the revolver, and left. And that would explain why there was only one gun found in the car and how that gun got there. Because if it was a car that was used by both Neely and her husband, he may have left the gun in the car after coming off of his Coast Guard duties. And yes, there were problems going on between Chris Hallett, and there was also problems going on with Kirk Pendergrass. And so that would explain uh, some of the things that were going on just prior to the Hallett murder. Now, you folks remember that uh, Tim Holmseth did a video about Chris Hallett. He was very, very upset with Chris Hallett. He used expletives. He went into a rage. He said that Chris Hallett was a fraud and so forth. Now, This attitude was right up until the time Chris Allett was murdered, and then shortly afterward, all of a sudden, Tim Homeseth had an epiphany, and now Chris Allett was this big hero, defense contractor, doing all this annulment clause stuff and filing paperwork that mysteriously disappeared. He did a complete 180. And so we have this new mystery as to what is true here. Is this, in fact, the case that Neely Blanchard knew all along that Chris Hallett had a revolver in the house? She knew where the revolver was. She found the revolver, loaded it, used it to murder Chris Hallett, and left the house. And then, for some inexplicable reason that Tim Homeseth wouldn't explain, he decided that Neely Blanchard was innocent of the crime, and one of the suspects in the murder was the woman who witnessed the crime. Now, Tim Homeseth did not say immediately that maybe there was another reason for the death of Chris Hallett or something happened in the house. He immediately pinned the murder of Chris Hallett first on the witness of the crime and then on outside parties such as me and others. And he used the weird theory that I somehow took a gun out of Phil McConnell's house, got it past all kinds of airport security, brought it back here to the state of Florida, went up to Chris Hallett's house to a man that I have never met in my life and murdered him. And this is all part of some big CIA operation to off Chris Hallett. Um, well, yeah, he capitalized on the story, but he also, I believe, initiated a cover up because never to any of his people over on Telegram that I've been able to find where he has mentioned that he is Christopher Edward Hallett was his power of attorney. It was always thought that Randy Lynn Erickson was his power of attorney. Nowhere can anyone find any information to where Chris Hallett took over as his power of attorney. Now he is going to have to provide that information. Well, they in fact do, Richard, because I've since finding out about this, a revolver has a revolving cylinder. When you fire a shot and reset it, after shooting the bullet, the cylinder turns to the next bullet and then you shoot it again. It's a complicated mechanism. And if it's like, say, a 38 special, they will jam. And that's one of the reasons that law enforcement went to the 9mm is because revolvers were bulky, hard to handle, and they did jam on rare occasions, especially an older one that was worn. Um, because what happens is, I think there's like a single action, double action. Uh, well, if that's the case, Tennessee TN lights, then what she did was she reloaded the weapon. Um, there's been stories that it jammed and stories that it did not. But if she took time to reload the gun, then you know that eliminates the jam theory, and that means she also knew how to use a revolver. But will come out in the discovery will be who owned the gun, what kind of gun it was, and the forensics that has to do with that firearm. And when the witness goes on the stand and gives her testimony, which will always, uh, yeah, that's where the jamming came from. She thought it was jammed. Um, and Shannon also testified that there were 4 shots. Now, there may have been more than that. Uh, Revolvers generally can be 6 to 8 bullets, depending on the design. More commonly, it's 6. Um, and they generally will eject the gun casing, which might explain why there were gun casings on the floor. But that could be. It could be she just simply ran out of ammunition. She found 2 more bullets to put in there and finished them off. Now, they, there's been no obituary or forensic examination of his body that shows, um, you know, where the bullets went in and the specifics that a medical examiner gets into about that. I haven't checked on that. I believe under Florida law, they don't disclose that information in order to protect the rights of the victim. But, that's going to have to be checked. But at any rate, this gives a plausible explanation as to why Tim Holmseth is hell bent on pinning this on other people, and why, for some reason, that there has not been a mention that Chris Hallett was his power of attorney. And why would he have a power of attorney in the state of Florida when he does not live in the state of Florida? You know, there's something fishy going on with this case. Um, I imagine she would be, because with all this publicity that Homeseth is putting out, it is actually putting her safety and security as well as that of her daughter at risk. And that gets into witness intimidation by Mr. Homeseth. He is determined that Shannon not testify against Neely Blanchard, and this would be a way to do it. Well, Richard, there was that. Plus, in the phone call that she made to the woman on the day she was leaving Florida, she had admitted to that. Um, she said that Mr. Hallett had to be dealt with, and so on and so forth. It was a very important phone call. And also in the call that she made to her husband, it was also made clear that uh, she felt it was necessary to do it. Now, it needs to be noted that you see no remorse, no empathy, no concern over the murder of Chris Hallett by Neely. There's no saying they need to find the person that did this. I'm being framed for this. None of that. It's coming up with strategy, telling her husband don't mention anything because the calls are being recorded. It's all about her and her situation and all of these conspiracy theories. Not once has she mourned the loss of Chris Hallett, been sad about it. There's been no remorse, absolutely nothing. It's a cold blooded murder, if we are to believe the facts. Now, again, I have to insist that Neely is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. And I need to remind people that just because we say things on here doesn't mean it's true. The final arbiter of all this is going to be the jury that is selected for this case. But I just find it interesting that these people are concentrating on trying to get Neely Blanchard offline as a suspect in this case and trying to pin this on the usual suspects. In addition to that, bringing in the woman who actually witnessed the murder as being the one who either did it or participated in it. So that's where things stand right now. But this is this kind of explains to some degree why Tim Holseth has been so intent to divert attention away from Neely Blanchard, divert attention towards us, those of us who want the truth and are simply waiting to see what comes out at the trial. The fact that Tim Holmseth now admits that he had an absolute direct connection to Chris Hallett sheds a whole new light on this case because he probably at one point was afraid that it was going to come out that Chris Hallett was his power of attorney and that he was working directly with Tim Holmseth on his case. We all thought that it was Kirk Pendergrass that was the primary player here. Now it looks like it was Chris Hallett because right up until November 15th, 2020, Chris Hallett was Tim Holmseth's attorney. There was never anything filed where Randy Erickson or anyone else took over from Chris Hallett. So this brings up a whole new group of questions. Now, just today, uh, Holmes's blog has an article about the murder of the two children, and they have sourced yet another conspiracy theorist over on Facebook is saying that he has managed to come up with additional photographs and has, through some mysterious method, been able to show a better image of the person or persons that murdered the two teenagers. And there are other things on here that I had intended to talk about tonight, but I'm going to push over in tomorrow because I want to be better prepared since there's new information coming out. But this just uh, points out that there are more to this story than we originally thought. That um, there are some hidden motivations in here when it comes to the actions of certain people. And now we are looking at this direct connection to the case, as well as this new information about the weapon used in the murder of Chris Allen. Because if it turns out to be true that it was Chris Hallett's own gun that killed him, then this doesn't look good for Neely Blanchard, and it also shows that there is more going on here than was originally known. Now, what I want to do is I want to go to Marion. Well, if um, okay, we have a new development as of today in the Blanchard case. I'm bringing up the attorney for Neely Blanchard has filed a motion to continue the pretrial for June 8th, 2023, uh, on the basis as follows. Defense counsel has filed a notice of conflict on June 8th regarding United States versus Camille Muhammad, case 822, CR, so on and so forth, in the Middle District of Florida, Tampa Division, before the U.S. District Judge Charles Edwards Honeywell. 3-week trial term commencing June 5th through June 23rd, 2023. Item number 2, Dr. Harry Coop, defense expert, has been set for deposition July 26, 2023. 3, the state's expert, although disclosed, has not been engaged and cannot do so until Dr. Coop's records and disposition has been provided. It is anticipated that Mr. Demaray, the state's expert, will have his deposition addressed in September. It does not appear this case is realistically ready for trial until October 2023. It is requested that the state appropriately set on the court's October 26, 2023 pretrial docket for further action. The defendant has previously waived speedy trial. The state of Florida waives any objection to the continuance. Wherefore, the defendant requests that the motion to continue pre-trial schedule for June 2023 be granted and placed on the October 26, 2023 pre-trial docket at 8:30 a.m. courtroom 3D. So it looks like we got until October before we even find out when this thing's going to go forward. She, it's, you know, but the thing of it is, Neely Blanchard's going to be in jail that much longer. Neely Blanchard has been in court or been in jail since September of 2020. And so she will pass 2023, September 2023, and still be in jail. She must like it there. As for whether or not the trial is going to be broadcast, I don't know. Whitey. Anyway, no, the trial uh, is up in the air, I guess, because if the state of Florida did not object to this, then it's going to be until October that Neely Blanchard is going to be in jail. Well, Richard, it goes back to kind of a psychology that people, if they invest so much into believing something, they're not inclined to change their mind. And there are professional techniques that are being used by the oh geez, I gotta sneeze. So I'm gonna I try not to sneeze on camera. Uh, well, I am white, so but hell, they call me Whitey, so why not? But I guess we're gonna have to wait and see if the court schedules this. It looks like, with all the arguments that the defense counsel is giving, that it's looking like it's going to be October of this year before this thing hits court. Um, so this means we get to endure all this crap from Home Seth until October, and they will continue this propaganda, and now they're going to have to figure out how they're going to spin the revelation that Chris Hallett was Tim Holmseth's power of attorney. So, oh my goodness. So, I will have to re-rack what I had planned on doing for the month of June. And we'll figure out something else to do. Because now we got to wait this out until October. Um, and I just found out that the propaganda channel is in here monitoring us again, as always. But that's fine. Anyway, so that's where things stand. I'll probably close down at the top of the hour, but I will be back here tomorrow to discuss this other stuff that has come up. Um, that has to do with Alex and some more of this tomfoolery from Holseth. But just as a reminder that Tim Holmseth has admitted that Christopher Hallett was his power of attorney uh, as of November 15th, 2020. And he was nice enough to put this on an official document with the state of Florida. And this will be brought to the attention of the state of attorney's office so that they can decide what they want to do with this material. And, some other information is going to be looked into as time goes on. So, but, getting back to this stupidity that Holmseth did, um, this shows his lack of knowledge in anything, because the state of Florida really does not have anything to do with the matter that Alexander Goddard has with Holmseth out of the state of Ohio. He why he decided to pester the state of Florida with this is beyond logical. But it's there. He's the one that posted it. There's no denying it. So now it's time for him to explain it. And all this does is this gives the state of Florida evidence that Randy Erickson probably should not be entitled to retain her real estate license. So we'll see where that goes. Well, the prosecutor's going to know about this tomorrow morning. Matter of fact, the prosecutor probably already does because I think this information was sent the moment it was received. And so the state of Florida attorney, state attorney will probably call over to Tallahassee to find out what this all has to do with the Blanchard case. So this is going to create more evidence against Neely Blanchard. So, if Tim Holmesat thought he was doing Neely Blanchard any favors, he's sadly mistaken. He's basically made it that much harder for Neely to win her case. Well, I would imagine that Holmesat could withdraw um, Chris Hallett as a POA post mortem and appoint somebody else. A power of attorney, um, you can appoint anybody you want and you can rescind that um, permission at any time. It can be a permanent thing, a big thing. When I was a car dealer, we would get temporary power of attorney for the specific reason of handling the paperwork for registering an automobile to the new buyer and all the paperwork that goes along with it. Uh, so it's just, it's fancy wording for basically someone that does a specific um, duty or a specific set of duties for an individual. Bill McConnell has a power of attorney for a guy to handle his affairs uh, on an interim basis. And, you know, people have used power of attorneys for various reasons for quite some time. Usually, a power of attorney is granted to an executor of an estate upon the death of the primary party and all that. So that's how a power of attorney works. It's you're not an actual attorney. You're not a member of the bar. You're just somebody that's given temporary permission to do what is necessary under that assignment. Okay, so that is going to be a wrap for me. I appreciate you people tuning in. Please like, subscribe, hit the notification button, and share. And I will be in here again tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Eastern, with more stuff. And as soon as I find out what the state of Florida is going to do about the continuance of this trial, I will get it to you. But it looks at this point, if the state has not objected to it, that we are not going to hear anything about this case until October. So it'll give me just more time to do research. Thank you all for coming in. Have a good week. See you tomorrow night. And until then, have a good one.